Welcome, everyone. We will begin the webinar on paint booth optimization presented by BASF. I'm Melissa Joles with RDA Impact. John Shoemaker, Business Development Manager, Automotive Refinish Coatings North America for BASF, is your presenter today. The presentation will take approximately 60 minutes, and we are recording it and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. If you do have questions during the webinar, you can type them in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen, and they will be answered during the presentation. Now I'll turn it over to John. John?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the presentation. And Melissa and I were just talking that I have two dogs, and they're here with me because if I put them somewhere else, they're going to bark. But if I keep them by me, they stay pretty quiet. But it seems like I'm now in Amazon Prime distribution zone, so I get people coming to the door dropping packages off because my wife orders a lot. And so they will bark, maybe. And so if they do, we'll just listen to them for a minute and we'll just continue on. But I'm happy that RDA has asked me to do this presentation about paint booth optimization. I think that's where a lot of people need assistance. And I think there's a lot to be gained by just improving how we work stuff through our paint booths. We'll get rolling. And if anybody has any questions, please, like Melissa said, pop them in the chat. We'll take them as they come and make this education process a team effort. I think we learn more from each other than we do from me. So we'll just keep going. The biggest struggle I see with shops in the paint shop is they have too much going on in the paint shop, and everything becomes a priority, especially those shops that schedule in on Monday, out on Friday. It seems like Mondays and Tuesdays, the paint shop people are laying in hammocks, and on Thursday and Friday, they're jamming, trying to get everything done. So I built this little formula to try and help shops schedule properly. You know, the bottleneck in most shops is the paint shop, so let's schedule based on what the paint shop can put out. And it's really a simple formula. You take the number of ROs you've delivered over a 30-day period, divide it by the number of weeks, tells you how many vehicles you've been able to produce per week, so that tells you that this particular shop could do 7 repairs a day. So we gear up to make sure that our paint department can put out those 7 vehicles continually every day, Monday through Friday, not like 14 on Thursday and 14 on Friday. And make sure you base this schedule on what you can actually perform. This shop here is a shop that I've visited quite a bit. The manager and owner are very smart, but they were trying to manage their business based on their goals. He has 2 paint booths. His goals were to have 5 ROs per booth per day. And his people couldn't produce that, quite simply. You can see here 2 ROs did not get done. Those were moved to the next day. Now, if you have 10 more coming in that next day, now that gives you 12 to do on Wednesday. You know you can only do 8, so for Wednesday you're going to carry over 4. And I think you guys can see how this snowball is happening. Just because you want your shop to be able to do a certain amount doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do that. You need to just really find out exactly how much they can do and then base your scheduling on that. Now, developing this baseline is what really helps you move to the next level. You could see what their current performance is. Let's take the data we had from that last chart into this one and compared it against the goal. Paint hours, they're off. They're like 16 hours away, which then drives their paint hours per week. But if you look on boost cycles, they're only one boost cycle short. So maybe that's where we need to concentrate, is on boost cycles. And that's what we did in this shop. Really, it was a combination of two things. It was working on boost cycles and working on the number of ROs painted per day. And people go, well, wait a minute. What's the difference between a boost cycle per day and an RO painted per day? Well, an RO, you could paint multiple ROs in a paint booth if you put them in there right. So let's look at the results after a couple of weeks of working with this shop. As you can see, we got a little bit more paint hours. So that gave us more paint hours per week. We didn't really change our boost cycles per day, but we got more vehicle painted per day. So a couple of those metrics, even though we did not improve boost cycles, we improved the vehicles painted per day. So validate those improvements. Look at what caused those. It was more effective use of the booth. And that's kind of what we're going to try and wrap around today, is let's maximize our boost cycle. As you can see here, we don't necessarily have to get more boost cycles per day. It's good if we do, but it's even better if we get more vehicles painted per day. So how do we do that? Well, we've got to validate the equipment. We have to know that our equipment is going to perform. And that's everything that is involved, you know, soup to nuts, from your lighting to your spray guns and everything in between. I had a shop that had problems with their air dryer, so they replaced it. But they called us, our tech rep, and said, hey, I'm still getting moisture in my paint. What's the problem? Well, if you had a bad air dryer, anything past that air dryer collected that moisture, including the hoses in the paint booth. So it's important to check those and replace those if you need to. But one thing I really want to try and talk about today is your booth temperatures and metal temperatures. Two different things. This example here is from a shop that we have a clear that will dry in 15 minutes at 140 degrees metal temperature. So this guy kept calling and saying the clear's not working. I checked scale reports, he was mixing it right and everything. So we went in and we did this drill on his shop to look at his paint booth temperatures. So every 5 minutes we took a snapshot of the different panels on this vehicle. And remember, I told you that our clear would dry 15 minutes at 140. So how long did it take for these panels to get at 140? If he's putting that car in the booth, flipping it on bake, and then 15 minutes later expecting it to be done, it's not going to happen, because it took 20 minutes for the roof to get to 140 and 25 minutes for the hood panel to get to 140. And as you can see, those are the only panels that ever reached 140 degrees. So you need to work with your paint booth manufacturer to ensure that you determine the setting that you need to set your booth at to make sure that you get 140 degrees metal temperature. And this particular booth here was set at 150 they found out it needed to be set to 165 to get to 140 degrees in booth temperature. We've got to have optimum booth operations. We've got to have tools for the technicians to use. You don't necessarily need a prep cart like that. I don't really care if it's a little red wagon. It doesn't matter. But just like when we put a car in a body repair stall, we want that technician to have everything they need to complete the repair operations without having to leave the stall. We need to do the same thing for our prep technicians. We don't need to have them getting up, hunting for something, checking for something. We need them working on that car. And the way to do it is to have these things right at their hands where they can do it. The other thing is bumper stands. One of the shops I went into complaining about booth cycle time, I'm watching the painter hang things by coat hangers from the ceiling of this paint booth. And I says, how long have you been doing that? He goes, oh, it usually takes me about 15, 20 minutes to get everything in there. Where these different stands that are available, I mean, these part stands on the right side there aren't my favorite, but they'll work. Getting the specialized stands, and the numbers I put up there is all going to be based on what you do in your shop. Just like you figured out how many cars you can do, how many bumpers are you painting at one time? Same thing with
John, I have a question.
The hood. Sure.
It's how to store painted parts before assembly.
Okay. I personally like to leave them on the stands until they're ready to go back on the car. And most paint shops have like cool down areas for the cars, like just outside the booth, and you could put the parts on the stands to either side of the car and hold them there, and everything should be good. Did that answer it?
Okay.
And one good thing about the okay.
He says no, so I guess he's not understanding. He's saying no.
Okay. So most shops that I'm in, they put the parts on the stands adjacent to the car when it comes out of the booth. There's usually areas on either side of the car. And that seems to be working pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, and okay, and if it does, if you'll have my email address at the end, and he can certainly email me. Maybe we'll talk one-on-one.
Okay.
Always happy
we'll do that.
to do that.
We'll follow up. We'll do that.
Yeah. And so, but the good thing about these special use stands, they're all designed to kind of fold flat and store really nice. They also hold the parts real well until they are ready to go back on the car. And the good thing about them is they hold the parts as they're going to be on the car. As you can see, the door and the fender is, held up vertically while the hood panel is horizontal. And they've redesigned that hood stand a couple times, and you can actually paint both sides of it while it's on the stand. Makes it pretty good. And then mobile drying systems, heat lamps for solvent-based primer, and of course UV lights. Right. We have to have these things available so our techs aren't running around looking for stuff. using the right products, together. We want to use, products that require a minimum of different components. We have a lot of products that they all use the same hardener, slow, medium, and fast. Our UV primers have what we call a zero pot life. It can stay in the pot forever. So those type things, if you don't have to stop and mix primer for every car, if you use UV primers, some of our solvent primers have a long pot life. Figure out what that is, and reduce the number of mixes you make. It always saves time. And anytime you can reduce SKUs in your inventory, you're going to reduce the amount of materials that you use, because you use more than one thing together. Here's one of the things that bottlenecks many paint shops, and that's color identification. We have to really do this sooner than most shops are doing them. I have some larger shops that are actually doing this in the blueprinting operation. They use the spectrophotometer, and they get the color matched there. They itemize the number of panels. All that goes on the blueprint sheet, and as that vehicle rolls into the paint shop, they can download that off the SKU and mix the paint while it's being prepped. So you have your paint match. Everything happened very, very early in the process. If you don't have a spectrophotometer, have your color matching tools down in the blueprint area. You'll create that spray out card if you need to early in the process. And then when you have your correct code, I always say, paints apart. Mix all the paint you're going to need to do the complete job all at one time, so you can document the quantity. We talk about a shop here for a little bit. This guy would stack parts up that needed to be cut in till he had enough to put in the paint booth. And then he would use his paint booth to cut in all the parts, and then he would take them back out and then put a car in. And he was losing a booth cycle. And I talked to him for a long time about, why don't we just paint the parts off the car and do it that way? And he didn't want to do it. I think he had a couple older techs that wanted to just have the parts cut in so they could put them on one time and everything. So I couldn't change his way of thinking, but I did talk him into putting in a cut-in booth. So if you're kind of insistent on cutting parts in, try and have a booth area that you can do that in, other than your production paint booth. It will get you miles ahead, production-wise. One more car a day or one more RO a day through a paint shop will pay for that cut-in booth. Worthwhile adventure. Same thing for jamming. The photo on the right is probably the perfect, and I took this inside of a paint booth, so it's not as clear as I want it to be, because the booth was actually on, and the plastic was fluttering. But here is a car. The replaced door is on a door stand at the front of the car. You can see they're doing the inside of the jam area while they're painting the quarter panel, and the right front door is a blend area. That's a perfect scenario. If you needed, again, we don't want to tire a paint booth up doing structure, painting structure and stuff. Let's have a prep deck. Prep decks are being more and more prominent in shops and becoming more and more versatile. I've seen shops that they do all their basing in prep decks and just use their paint booths for clear. They have 30-foot paint booths. They put 2 cars in them. They clear them all at once and they're done. Pretty good scenario. Does it fit everybody's, shop layout? Most of the time you can have a room for a prep deck in your somewhere in your preparation area. Some of you have attended some of my classes have heard me talk about, is a car ready to be repaired? You have a technician, you have a repair order, but is the car ready to be repaired? Well, I have that same question. Is a car ready to be refinished? In many, many instances, that answer is no. The bodywork's not done correctly. More shop stories, but a tech rep was getting called repeatedly to a shop trying to help them get cars through the paint shop, and I finally said I was going to go with him. We got there on a Monday afternoon, looked around, got there Tuesday morning and watched. They had a car in the booth. They were painting it. It was out of the booth. Another one was ready to go in. And I said, man, I don't know what's the problem. And then I heard these words, polyfill. And I looked at my tech rep, I go, polyfill, what are they using polyfill here for? I had a lot of restoration shops in my customer base, and they use polyfill quite a bit, but I don't see it used a lot in a production shop. So I started asking questions, and they pulled these 2 cars in the center of the shop between the 2 production lanes and sprayed polyfill on them. And I says, why are we doing that? He says, this body guy consistently sends us stuff with a lot of sand scratches and a lot of pinholes, so it's better for us just to polyfill them, let it set up, and then we'll sand it down. I looked at the car and I said, you realize you only have 4.5 hours to paint this car. You just wasted an hour and a half putting polyfill on. Now you've got to sand that polyfill, seal it, base it, clear it, everything else for 3 hours. I said, you're not paying yourself. So as we kept digging down into it, it wasn't really a paint shop problem, it was a body shop problem. So I got with the jobber and we ordered some of that 3M sanding chalk dust. Then the next day, we spent time educating the body guys how to get their vehicle ready for refinishing. And it wasn't sending it over there needing polyfill. Matter of fact, we got rid of all the polyfill and they used that guide coat to finish their body work. And they got rid of a lot of their problems. And we instituted this in-process QC process, which helped them because they were able to check and make sure. And that shop started treating everybody in the repair process as a customer. If you don't think you could sell that job you just did to the customer, don't try and sell it to the paint shop. And the same thing, if the paint shop doesn't think they could sell that job they just did to the customer, don't try to sell it to somebody within your own organization. make sure it's right before it moves from one place to another. And this right here eliminated a lot of bottlenecks in that shop. They went from doing 3 boost cycles a day to 6 within 2 weeks after we left. Great improvement, teamwork. So as you get these cars ready, you know you have it ready for refinishing. You've got to get it to the prep team. And you have to start tracking every single thing that comes into that shop. I don't care if it's a new repair, a comeback, a rework, track it all. Because while you don't make any money maybe on comebacks or rework, it definitely detracts from your production time. So you have to track that. And it's a whole nother story about how do we solve that problem. But you have to track these. Preparing the vehicle, all the pre-cleaning. Again, you have that prep cart. So everything that prep technician needs is at his hands or her hands, and they're able to take care of this vehicle without getting up, all the way through to getting ready to go into the paint booth. It's very, very important to follow repair procedures to eliminate comebacks. Everybody that's listening here today has had a problem with a bumper peeling after they painted it. We did some testing in our labs with some different products and put out this process. And it's a simple solvent test. If you could wipe primer off with a rag, don't expect anything else ever to stick to it, because it won't. You have to strip it off and treat it like a raw plastic bumper. This is aftermarket or OEM as well as aftermarket. We found it on both sides. But follow the processes to get the surfaces prepared properly. And you'll see me say it a bunch of times, make sure you know what substrate you're working with. Every substrate has different processes that need to be followed. As you prepare your vehicle to send it, you want to create what I call repeatable process. Follow the SOPs, do it the same way, the same time, every time, and you will produce quality refinishing operations. And you will get faster and faster. You'll start maximizing the amount of work that you can do just by following these repeatable processes. Masking isn't a hard thing to do, but we see people do it wrong. Leaving a hard masking line when they're priming. And then we've got to sand all that back. And that's why I like all the priming that happened in the refinish shop, because painters know how to prime for refinishing, where body guys seem to know how to prime to cover up their bodywork. And we really need to use proper priming procedures to make the rest of the job turn out the way the customer expects. Just follow the SOP, create those repeatable processes. UV primer. I hope people are getting more and more familiar with UV primer, because it is really the bomb in speeding up refinish processes and maximizing the capability of the paint shop. I mean, 5 minutes and this is dry, ready to sand. 1 to 2 coats gives you the proper mill thicknesses. Let it flash. Go over it twice with the J-light. and you are ready to sand. I played with this a little bit at our schoolhouse in Maryland one day. Hit a fender with 120, 2 coats of UV primer, cured it, scuffed it real quick with 320, based it and cleared it. And we had that whole fender and everything painted within like 20 minutes. Amazing products using UV, something that will really accelerate your process. You do have to be a little careful with the heat lamp and plastic, so make sure you read the SOP for it. Standard primer, again, this has a lot to do with metal temperature. You can't pull a car in from outside, scuff it for a little while, and then put primer on it. Most products, they want it to be at least 60 degrees, the metal temperature at least 60 degrees before you put anything on it. Plastic needs to be a little bit warmer because plastic tends to hold a little bit of moisture. So again, follow the SOPs, develop those repeatable processes that make you faster and more efficient. Final sanding, again, simple, repeatable processes. Follow the SOPs. We have some products that make things a little bit faster. The wet-on-wet processes, as well as E-coat sealing. It doesn't require any sanding of the E-coat. So look for the best products to get you where you need to be with your efficiencies, and that will indeed speed your process up. I'm showing a lot of 3M SOPs because they've done this right. They have created the products, they've created the processes to go with those products, and they know what works well together. Again, they've created these repeatable processes that enhance the efficiencies and take you to the next level. Final cleaning, this is, basic, we're getting kind of basic stuff, but these are some of the areas that people do wrong, and it's important to read the applications, the tech sheet. We've talked about different substrates. This one here is do not use it on plastic. They want you to use liberal amounts with clean cloths. While still wet, wipe it dry. Don't let it dry on the. Well, a lot of times when you leave cleaning products to dry on their own, you're leaving everything that you wanted to clean on the car. It leaves solvents in the background. Unless you wipe it all the way off, it doesn't quite work. Final masking, they're showing you my favorite way to mask. That's with no masking paper. You fine line the edges, use 1.5-inch masking tape, and then you'll cover the vehicle with plastic once it's in the booth. I've even got shops where they've got that car completely covered in plastic before it's into the booth, and they just roll it up to get in the car and then roll it back down. You have to be somewhat careful with that because you can move dirt around. So as long as you're careful and understand, you roll it up very carefully and then roll it back down without shaking it, you won't get too much. Any dirt down in there. Now here's where we're going to probably make the best moves. And that's staging a vehicle and getting it ready to go in the booth. I got called into a shop. He wanted me to rearrange his shop layout so he could add another booth. And I said, "You really need another booth?" He says, "Well, I'm not getting enough paint work done." So when I visited that shop, the booth was running good. I peeked in there, and all that was in that booth was a bumper. So I said, "Well, you're definitely not going to get a lot of production done if you're painting one bumper at a time." So I took and I measured the inside of his booth, and I used masking tape, and I made an outline outside his booth with the exact measurements of the inside of his booth. And we started using that as a staging area. We would put a car there, and then, oh, we could fit this tailgate. Oh, we can fit this bumper. It might not all have went to that car, but we fit all those pieces in there. Refinishing 2 or 3 ROs at a time. We saw how that worked for that one shop on that scorecard. It's going to work here as well. And so know your booth capacity, maximize what you can put in there. If you're using waterborne, you got to be mindful of airflow and make sure that you're not blocking, and takes a little time to play with it to make sure that you get parts positioned properly, which will be more and more efficient the more that you can fit into that booth at one time. And the way base coat is right now, there's not a lot of overspray. You can spray multiple colors in the same booth. So it won't cause you really any problems. And there's a car masked off the way I like it. If you do it right, you make your wheel covers and everything with one sheet of plastic. He's got the filler door up on the front, taped to a piece of plastic. And that's the way that we should have cars masked in the shop. He could have really made the windshield cover out of the plastic, but some people like it to be a little more rigid than that on horizontal surfaces. Verify your room temperature. We talked about that. Make sure you're getting that metal temperature right. So check over all the masked areas. Make sure that we've got everything covered. You know, overspray is the hardest thing to clean off a car. It really slows down the operation. Wipe it down. Validate that metal temperature. I cannot emphasize that enough. Read your tech sheets when you get back to your shop and find out what it says about temperature. I think some of you will be surprised. Again, develop these repeatable processes. It's repetitive steps. It's the same steps every time. And as you develop those habits and repeatable process, you become more efficient. As you get the vehicle completed, take just enough masking material off to move it out. And I like it when the whole paint shop gets together and gets that car out of the paint booth and gets it ready to cool down. I mean, if you could get that car out and the next one in and be ready to spray the next car within 15 minutes, you are right on target. And you will increase your booth cycles, you will optimize your paint shop, and you will be better as you get along and all work together as a team. There's another QC stop point. Again, don't pass something on to somebody in your shop that you wouldn't be able to sell to the customer. Find your defects and get them corrected before you move them on. And I encourage people to keep track of their defects. You need to know where they're coming from so you know how to correct them and eliminate them. Getting that finish ready to go to reassembly, you want to do all your buffing and everything before you send it to reassembly. And I've put up two different processes here. 3M has a very, very solid process. Rupus has a solid process. Griot's Garage, Presto, all kinds of these people have processes. It's very, very important to stay within a process. Stay with all 3Ms, stay with all Rupus, all Griot's Garage, Presto, whatever, and follow that process as they've designed it, and that is what gets you more efficient. Trying to mix products here and there, you're not going to be successful. Stay within a program. This is the last slide. I talked pretty quick and we moved pretty fast. So we have some time for questions at the end. You have to track your ROs. We talked about this earlier, and you saw on that sheet earlier how you track the ROs, show exactly what you're able to do. And again, it's just as important to track redos as comeback as it is your production work. Because while they don't add to your production capability, they do detract from your shop optimization and efficiency. So you want to track those. You want to find out what caused them. It's a whole nother class about redos. But track how many you can do and make sure that that's processed up to the front office so they could schedule the body processes correctly to meet the improvements that you are making in the paint shop. And that is the presentation. People could come off mute, I guess, to answer questions if we have that capability, Melissa.
Yeah, we could do that, or they could type them in. The original question we had about the paint, I told them that we could follow up with him, but he did mention he had large quantities of painted parts, like 5 hoods, 10 covers, 10 doors, all in pre-assembly.
Right.
So.
Wow. That's why you'd almost have to look at somebody's shop and see what kind of space they have, because that's a lot of parts. It sounds like he's doing the right thing and painting parts off the car. Having a place to store them, if you send them back to the technician, they have opportunity to get scratched if they're not ready to go back on the car. So yeah, that would take some thought there. That's a lot of parts.
I don't see any other questions. And I will follow up with everyone on the call, and I will send out John's contact information so you can follow up with him directly. And we'll send out a copy of this presentation because we are recording it. So I'm not seeing any questions. I think, John, we'll conclude this webinar. We hope everybody found this information informative, and we'll be in touch with future training opportunities. John, thanks for your time today. Thanks, everyone. And take care.
Thank you.